Welcome back to Superbly Said, Advanced English Vocabulary and Phrases.
This is a SpeakDuo lesson. You can go to SpeakDuo.com to meet new people from around the world who are practicing English on video calls to become more confident with their speaking abilities.
Our critique today covers a submitted document titled, How I Managed to Start a Conversation with Anyone, which teaches conversational expressions to advanced English learners.
The opening of the document lacks the compelling hook that explicitly identifies its target audience and the platform's core value proposition.
Right. The weakness there is that the first slide just displays the video title and the words "download the app." That abruptly skips a crucial opportunity to establish a welcoming tone, clarify that this is for advanced learners, and explain the practical, interactive benefits.
So the suggestion is to create a brief but engaging introductory paragraph. Welcome the user, state the focus on advanced vocabulary, and highlight the specific benefits of SpeakDuo before diving into the idioms.
As a concrete example, the opening script could literally be what we just said. Welcome back to Superbly Said, Advanced English Vocabulary and Phrases. This is a SpeakDuo lesson.
Exactly. And then you mentioned going to SpeakDuo.com to meet new people practicing English on video calls. After that short hook, the text can proceed straight to the first expression.
And we should make it clear to the creator that this is just one out of all possible ways to properly frame the material.
Moving on, the material presents its target idioms clearly, but misses a critical opportunity to deepen the learner's understanding through comparative analysis and advanced situational examples.
Right, because defining a phrase like to come off as in isolation, it provides a good baseline, but that's a significant weakness for an advanced audience. They really need to understand how these phrases differ from very similar alternatives.
And they need to see how they function in high-stakes environments rather than just casual, everyday scenarios.
The core suggestion is that for each expression, include a segment that compares the phrase to a nuanced alternative and provide example sentences reflecting professional conversations, interactions with a boss, or standardized tests like the IELTS Speaking Part 2.
Let's demonstrate this with the first phrase, to come across. We could compare it to run into.
Yeah, while both imply an unexpected encounter, running into is generally used for physically meeting a person, whereas coming across is frequently used for passively discovering an object or a piece of information.
So for a formal workplace example, you could say, while reviewing the quarterly reports, I came across a highly unusual discrepancy in the accounting data. And emphasize that these suggestions are just a few out of all possible ways to elevate the content's rigor.
Definitely. For the second phrase, to come off as, we can push the boundaries by comparing it to the alternative to seem like.
Right, because to seem like is a passive observation from an outsider, but to come off as implies an intentional or unintentional projection of your own personality onto an audience. It carries a real psychological weight.
An IELTS Speaking Part 2 example could perfectly capture that. Like, I was incredibly nervous during the job interview, but I carefully monitored my tone because I didn't want to come off as lacking confidence to the hiring manager.
That perfectly illustrates the stakes. For the third expression, to stare into the distance, let's compare it to the act of glaring.
Staring into the distance denotes a lack of immediate visual focus, usually linked to deep internal thought or daydreaming, while glaring is an intense, hyper-focused look of hostility.
A great workplace example to illustrate that internal processing is when my boss asked the executive team for a solution to the supply chain crisis. The room went completely silent and he just stared into the distance, lost in strategic thought.
Now for the fourth expression, to be triggered. Advanced learners desperately need to know the difference between being triggered and simply being annoyed.
Yeah, being annoyed is just a mild, everyday frustration. To be triggered implies a severe, instantaneous, and highly emotional reaction, often disproportionate to the event because it touches on a deeper sensitivity.
So in a professional context, you could deploy an example like, during the board meeting, the CEO was visibly triggered by the mere suggestion that our rigorous safety protocols were being compromised.
I really like how that elevates the vocabulary. Now for the fifth expression, to filter oneself, a fantastic comparative alternative is to lie or to censor.
Right. Filtering oneself isn't necessarily about telling a falsehood. It's about the diplomatic, real-time withholding of one's unfiltered thoughts to maintain social or professional harmony.
An excellent IELTS Part 2 example showcasing this diplomacy would be, when I'm communicating with international clients from different cultural backgrounds, I constantly have to filter myself to ensure I don't use local idioms that might be misinterpreted as unprofessional.
Moving to expression 6, to play it safe. Let's draw a sharp contrast between this phrase and being cowardly.
Playing it safe is an active, strategic choice to mitigate unnecessary risk, whereas being cowardly implies a moral or personal failure driven by fear.
A strong example for interacting with a boss could be, given the current economic volatility in the global market, I strongly advise the executive team to play it safe and delay the experimental product launch until the third quarter.
For the seventh expression, to branch off, we should compare it with the concept of getting sidetracked. Getting sidetracked implies an accidental, unproductive loss of focus, a mistake.
Branching off, conversely, can be a highly productive, deliberate shift into a related and necessary subtopic, like saying, our budget meeting started with a focus on marketing spend, but we quickly branched off into a necessary discussion about long-term resource allocation.
Finally, let's address the eighth expression, to hang out. Because this is inherently casual, we should directly compare it to a professional equivalent like to network.
While both involve spending time with other people, hanging out is purely for personal relaxation and authentic social enjoyment. Networking is a highly transactional activity aimed at professional advancement.
So, an IELTS candidate discussing work-life balance might say, while I recognize the importance of networking at corporate events to build my career, on Friday evenings, my only goal is to hang out with my close friends and completely disconnect from my responsibilities.
Moving to the next major area of improvement, the current practice sections rely entirely on open-ended discussion prompts, which promote conversational fluency but lack a definitive mechanism for assessing precise vocabulary comprehension.
The weakness here is that asking learners to discuss open-ended prompts in a breakout room, like, what easily triggers you, is certainly engaging, but it doesn't objectively confirm whether they understand the exact, nuanced definition of the vocabulary. It leaves far too much room for uncorrected misunderstandings.
The suggestion is to implement a structured, multiple-choice quiz at the end of the material that tests the exact definitions of the phrases using plausible distractors, complete with immediate feedback and contextual reminders.
To demonstrate exactly how this should be formatted and delivered to the learner, we are going to conduct this quiz right now. We will announce the options as Option A, Option B, and Option C, while repeating the relevant phrase to remind the audience what they're trying to guess the definition for.
And we will provide the answers immediately after each question, rather than at the end, along with a quick reminder about the example covered earlier so that people can really learn.
Let's begin. Question 1. What is the meaning of the phrasal verb to come across? Option A. To unexpectedly meet someone or discover something entirely by chance without any prior planning. Option B. To successfully explain a highly complicated concept so that everyone completely understands the main idea. Option C. To intentionally travel across different borders to explore completely unfamiliar and foreign cultural environments. Feel free to pause the audio here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct answer is Option A. To come across means to unexpectedly meet someone or discover something entirely by chance, without any prior planning. As a quick reminder of our earlier example, we discussed a professional coming across a highly unusual discrepancy while reviewing quarterly financial reports.
Question 2. If someone is worried about how they come off as, what are they concerned with? Option A, they are worried about rapidly physically distancing themselves from a conversation that feels overly intrusive. Option B, they're worried about unintentionally or intentionally giving a particular impression to other people. Option C, they're worried about successfully removing a difficult personal flaw from their established professional reputation. Feel free to pause the audio here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct answer is Option B. To come off as means they are worried about unintentionally or intentionally giving a particular impression to other people. A quick reminder from our earlier example. We highlighted an IELTS candidate carefully monitoring their tone so they wouldn't come off as lacking confidence to a hiring manager.
Question 3. What does it mean to stare into the distance? Option A. To closely monitor an approaching object to precisely determine its exact speed and potential trajectory. Option B. To maintain intense and unwavering eye contact with someone to show absolute and total social dominance. Option C. To look far away while deeply thinking, daydreaming, or not focusing on any specific object or person. Feel free to pause the audio here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct answer is option C. To stare into the distance means to look far away while deeply thinking, daydreaming, or not focusing on any specific object or person. Remember our earlier example where a boss, when asked for a solution to a supply chain crisis, went completely silent and stared into the distance, lost in strategic thought?
Question 4. Which of the following describes what happens when someone is triggered? Option A. They experience a very strong, sudden, negative emotional reaction to something another person says or does. Option B. They are officially selected to initiate a highly complex mechanical process or a specialized digital system. Option C. They gradually develop a mild sense of curiosity regarding an incredibly controversial modern social discussion. Feel free to pause the audio here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct answer is option A. To be triggered means they experience a very strong, sudden, negative emotional reaction to something another person says or does. This ties back to our quick reminder of the CEO who was visibly triggered by the mere suggestion that corporate safety protocols were being compromised.
Question 5. Why might a person feel the need to filter themselves during a conversation? Option A. To thoroughly cleanse their physical environment of any potential psychological toxins or harmful external influences. Option B. To carefully control what they say to avoid offending anyone or unintentionally revealing their true thoughts. Option C. To strictly consume media that perfectly aligns with their previously established personal and political beliefs. Feel free to pause the audio here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct answer is option B. To filter oneself means to carefully control what they say to avoid offending anyone or unintentionally revealing their true thoughts. As a quick reminder of our lesson example, we talked about a professional filtering oneself during international client meetings to avoid using confusing local idioms.
Question 6. In a social or professional setting, what does it mean to play it safe? Option A. To enthusiastically participate in a recreational activity without worrying about the final competitive outcome. Option B. To strategically manipulate a difficult interpersonal situation in order to gain a massive social advantage. Option C. To completely avoid taking any unnecessary risks and deliberately choose the most careful or secure option. Feel free to pause the audio here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct answer is option C. To play it safe means to completely avoid taking any unnecessary risks and deliberately choose the most careful or secure option. A reminder of our earlier example is advising an executive team to play it safe and delay an experimental product launch due to economic volatility.
Question 7. What does it mean when a discussion begins to branch off? Option A. It changes the direction of the conversation to a completely new but conceptually related conversational topic. Option B. It physically separates a large corporate department into several much smaller and entirely independent divisions. Option C. It abruptly ends a long conceptual dialogue and refuses to communicate with the other participant altogether. Feel free to pause the audio here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct answer is option A. When a conversation begins to branch off, it changes the direction of the conversation to a completely new but conceptually related conversational topic. A quick reminder of our earlier example is a budget meeting initially focused on marketing that quickly branched off into a necessary, productive discussion about resource allocation.
Finally, question 8. How is the phrase to hang out defined in the context of the lesson? Option A. To nervously wait outside a specific location for an incredibly important professional or corporate business meeting. Option B. To spend your personal time relaxing, conversing, or socializing casually with someone you generally enjoy knowing. Option C. To forcefully suspend an object from a significant height to effectively test its overall physical structural integrity. Feel free to pause the audio here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct answer is option B.
To hang out means to spend your personal time relaxing, conversing, or socializing casually with someone you generally enjoy knowing. Remember our example contrasting the desire to hang out with close friends on Friday evenings to disconnect versus actively networking at corporate events to build a career?
And we should clarify to the creator that this exact quiz structure is just one possible way of solving the assessment gap, but it's highly effective.
To briefly recap our main actionable suggestions, add an engaging, superbly said intro hook to instantly align your advanced audience and set the tone. Next, introduce nuanced comparisons with professional or IELTS examples for each idiom to push beyond basic definitions.
And finally, conclude the material with a structured, multiple-choice comprehension quiz with plausible distractors, like we just demonstrated.
We invite you to implement these suggestions and submit your revised work back in for more feedback.